Hello again, everyone, and thanks for joining us for this June 1st edition of Alaska Weather. I'm Dave Percy, meteorologist with the National Weather Service here in Anchorage, Alaska, and I'll be hosting today's show. First graphic today, fire danger pushed back to the north from what it was yesterday, but still includes the Fairbanks area and the very high to mostly extreme now off to the west-southwest of the greater Fairbanks area, but quite an area of extreme fire danger from the upper Yukon Valley westward, and then kind of slacks off as you get out toward the Kobuk Valley. And less fire danger out over the Seward Peninsula than yesterday, but still an area in the central areas down to the northeast there in toward Norton Bay of high to very high fire danger. And otherwise, much lighter with precipitation that fell in some cases around Northway Toketadala Junction, really reduced fire danger there into the Copper River Basin and all of southern Alaska, but still a high area there along the Bristol Bay coast, the Alaska Peninsula on the lee side of the Aleutian Range. And from there, we've got red flag warnings out again on the hazardous weather graphic here for until 10 p.m. this evening, once again for the Koyukuk, Kobuk Valley, Ambler, Selawik Valley there, and into the Galena, mid-Yukon River area. And that's for 10 p.m. tonight for extreme fire dangers due to mostly gusty winds and the lower humidities in the 20% range. Temperatures today not nearly as warm as yesterday, but still rising into the lower 70s in areas. Ambler was at 73, which was the warm spot in the state this afternoon, but those conditions fire weather-wise will improve here late this evening. And satellite imagery, you can see the sunshine up there over the northern interior, south of the Brooks Range. Low clouds gradually diminishing, though, on the north slope, and quite windy easterly winds across the north slope and Arctic coast today, keeping the temperatures cool, and in some cases gusting as high as 47 miles an hour. That was actually late last night, early this morning at Dead Horse, out of the east-northeast, and even on the west side, Point Lay had gusts of 40 miles an hour, but those winds diminished dramatically down toward Point Hope, Cape Lisburne, just 10 to 15 miles per hour. Also, other windy areas, Prince William Sound, seeing gusts up to 30 miles an hour today. Cape Decision, with that front on the southeast coast there, they're seeing gusts of 35 miles an hour. And Lynn Canal, southerlies this afternoon, 35 miles an hour. Haines, Skagway, and Eldred Rock. On the chart, rain also accompanied that frontal boundary there over the Panhandle. Nothing too terribly heavy. One of the more notable amounts in the last 12 hours was nearly half an inch that fell at Petersburg, 4/10 of an inch, actually closer to that. Up in the Copper River Basin, Talkeetna's got some lightning strikes showing up this afternoon, and that area, from the Talkeetna's up to actually the eastern upper Tanana Valley, westward out to the Nulato Hills. And but showers and rain falling over the Copper River Basin today, with Nabesna picking about half an inch of precipitation in the last 12 hours, and Paxton had a quarter of an inch. Out west, just southwest of McGrath, Flat had around a third of an inch of precipitation, with 1/10 of an inch falling at McGrath. And light rain, fog, Kodiak Island today, 1500ths, and that condition extended on down the Alaska Peninsula to Unalaska Island. Otherwise, not a bad day out over the Aleutians. Some mostly cloudy skies, light winds, and patchy areas of fog, but still a little breezy around the Pribilofs and the Alaska Peninsula, anywhere from 20 to 30 miles an hour on wind speeds out there. And the forecast for tonight, really no change out over the Bering Sea. Less of a chance of showers, just really widely scattered, more mist than hit there for the central eastern Aleutian areas. And chance of light rain, fog, and drizzle continue for the Alaska Peninsula to Kodiak Island, with that weak low center there pulling just to the north. And areas of light rain along the front there into the Panhandle. Also, again, evening thunderstorms along the trough axis, could be into the Yukon Delta, but those will be diminishing, but showers will persist throughout the night, especially through the central interior, with partly cloudy skies and drier conditions for the Copper River Basin. Chance of rain, Kenai Peninsula, Kodiak Island, and of course with the southeast coast. And it'll be another wet day for the Panhandle. Cloudy skies, including the North Gulf Coast back into Kodiak Island, with continued frontal action along and just off the coast. 995 millibar low south of the Alaska Peninsula will keep a chance of rain mostly on the south side. Not too bad in Bristol Bay. Partly sunny, a few scattered showers. Scattered thunderstorms develop once again Tuesday afternoon in the interior along the trough axis there from the Upper Tanana Valley, 40-mile country westward on out to maybe the southern Seward Peninsula, especially in the Lotto Hills, has a little bit better chance, but dry conditions to the north, mostly sunny skies. Temperatures 60s to lower 70s, and then cooler on the north slope after the morning low clouds and fog. It stays breezy, but maybe not quite as breezy along the eastern Arctic coast with, again, low clouds, fog, a little slower to end in that area. No change for the Bering Sea. Taking a look at Wednesday's outlook. Remnants of a front, call it a trough now, keeps it showery and cloudy over the Panhandle, as well as the North Gulf Coast into Prince William Sound. Look for a little more sun, south central Alaska, which may nudge the afternoon temperatures up a little bit in that area, but clouds, rain, fog, Kodiak Island, light easterly winds, probably keep temperatures no more than 50 degrees there. Scattered thunderstorms possible over the interior again. Mostly dry for the Arctic coast and even less winds, but still a little breezy on the east side. Low clouds and fog possible from the Bering Straits southward into the Bering Sea. And for lows tonight, mid to upper 20s for the Arctic coast north slope. Brooks Range upper 30s, lower 40s. South of the mountains there, 40s to lower 50s. Near 50 down into the lower Yukon and Kuskokwim River Valley areas to the deltas, but near 40 out along the coast and the Pribilofs. 40s for the Aleutians, Alaska Peninsula. South central Alaska, Copper River Basin, closer to 40 in some of the cooler, higher valleys, and in the 40s for the Panhandle. Highs tomorrow, 50s again, cool 50s for the southeast coast, and maybe lower 60s over south central Alaska, Copper River Basin. Otherwise, the interior, about like today, 60s to lower 70s, with lows or highs on the Arctic coast in the 30s. Back into the mid to upper 20s for the lows there for Wednesday morning, and 40s, maybe near 50 in some locations over the west central interior, otherwise lows in the 40s all the way down to the North Gulf Coast, Panhandle, Kodiak Island, the Aleutians, in the 30s for the Bering Sea and along the southwest coast. And for afternoon highs, looking 60s to lower 70s once again, maybe a few more lower 70s what we've seen than what will be seen on Tuesday up over the interior, and should be warmer, more into the 60s, especially for the Susitna, Manuska Valley areas, Copper River Basin, lower 60s, otherwise 50s to maybe lower 60s for the southeast coast. Out in the west, upper 30s, St. Lawrence Island, but near 50 for the Pribilofs, otherwise upper 40s for the Aleutians, and lower to mid 50s for the Alaska Peninsula, lower or 60 to 65 for Bristol Bay.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
All right, first flying weather graphic Tuesday morning, IFR again, low clouds and fog north slope Arctic coast. VFR, Brooks Range southward till you get in toward the Kuskokwim Valley, Alaska Range. And then you got areas of marginal VFR with some VFR over the Copper River Basin and Cook Inlet. Kodiak Island, IFR, that goes up along Montague on the North Gulf Coast and down along the Panhandle. IFR south side of the Alaska Peninsula. Areas of IFR possible out over anywhere of the Bering Sea and the Aleutians. And that big broad brush of conditions continues into Tuesday out there, just calling it IFR for the entire Aleutian chain. Pribilofs north through the Bering Strait to the northwest coast, wrapping back into the central Arctic coast. VFR in the interior with areas of marginal VFR, Alaska Range. Southwest Mountains, IFR. Again, swath there brushed in from Kodiak Island up to the North Gulf Coast, marginal VFR for the Panhandle. And for Wednesday morning, same thing, North Slope, low clouds, fog, IFR, Arctic coast as well. IFR, again, just IFR over areas of the Bering Sea and the Aleutians. It won't be all solid IFR like this chart shows, but pretty good chance somewhere at some point in the day you'll see IFR out there. Alaska Peninsula as well, Kodiak Island, into the offshore areas of the Gulf of Alaska. Marginal VFR with areas of VFR over the Panhandle and some scattered marginal VFR across southern Alaska. And for Wednesday afternoon, VFR from the Arctic coast all the way down to Cook Inlet. Possible marginal VFR, southern Kenai Peninsula, Prince William Sound, pretty likely. along the North Gulf Coast, and then some increasing VFR conditions for the Panhandle. A little bit of IFR there, Chiniak, Marmot Bays on the east side of Kodiak Island to Ozinki maybe, Fogneck Island marginal up into southern Cook Inlet, IFR, Bering Sea, and Aleutians through the Bering Strait. And for passes, Anatuvik starting out marginal, becoming VFR. Same trend for Adigan, marginal VFR becoming VFR. And Lake Clark and Merrill look for occasionally marginal throughout the day at times, VFR at other times, rainy, occasionally marginal VFR. And for windy, marginal VFR mixed in with some VFR conditions. Isabel, risk of a thunderstorm, otherwise mostly marginal. And Mentasta starting out marginal, becoming VFR. Tanita, marginal VFR. And Portage, marginal VFR, becoming IFR. And then for Chilcoot and White, marginal VFR at times. Freezing levels, 8,000 feet in closer to that upper level ridge that's off the northwest Arctic coast there, and 7,000 to 8,000 really over the northern half of the state, 4,000 to 6,000 from the southeast central Bering Sea, eastward across southern Alaska, and mostly 4,000 or so for the southeast coast. Looking at icing, kind of a band along the North Gulf Coast, extending eastward and then southeastward down the Panhandle of elevated icing threats of the mixed variety from freezing level to about 12,000 feet. And then there could be some scattered areas of mixed icing due to the convection there in the central interior along the Alaska Range out toward the Yukon River, and maybe Kodiak Island, but just a slight chance at that. Jet stream, upper level high continuing there north and northwest of the Arctic coast, and weak lows out over the central western Bering Sea. So we've got northeast flow, 35 to 40 knots. The main Pacific jet, 140 knots south on the south side of that low southwest of Kodiak, staying well of the forecast area, really blowing in and weakening as it approaches the Queen Charlotte Islands. Taking a look at the 9,000 foot wind flow chart, we've got 40 knot winds there to the southwest of the Queen Charlotte Islands, and then it drops off as it crosses a panhandle and picks back up to about 35 there in the Yukon. Light wind flow across southern Alaska and eastern Alaska, all the way up to the Arctic coast. Finally, lighter winds up that way, but maybe 35 knots out of the east-southeast, southwest interior, and 40 knots there across the Pribilof Islands. Otherwise, lighter winds for the western Aleutians, Chukchi Sea, pretty light winds as well. 3,000 foot winds, 40 to 50 knots off the southeast coast there. It'll be much lighter, probably 10 to maybe 20 along the central coast at the most. Otherwise, light variable winds, couple of lows over southern Alaska. Easterlies though up to 40 knots on the eastern Arctic coast, and 40 knot winds across Bristol Bay as well. Turbulence, occasional light to isolated moderate chop, eastern Beaufort Sea coast.
Dual polarization technology is a major upgrade to the current radar system. It allows forecasters a better idea of what's actually out there and can help keep you safe.
Current radar technology transmits and receives information in the horizontal direction, which is very limited. Dual polarization technology, in addition to the horizontal, transmits and receives vertical energy, which allows forecasters to get information about the size, shape, and phase of the precipitation. We can use that information to better determine the precipitation type to expect at your given location.
There you have it. This new technology is currently being installed in radars across the country and is already being used by National Weather Service forecasters to produce better, more accurate forecasts. Learn more here and follow us. Want to know about the future of weather radar? Well, the National Severe Storms Lab has it here with its new phased array radar. Let's check it out.
It's a non-moving radar. It has 4 faces of the antenna, each pointing in different directions. One of the big advantages is that we're seeing so far, it can sample the area around the radar in less than a minute, maybe even a half a minute. And this is 5-6 times faster than what they can do today.
NSSL is leading the development of future weather radar with this project. Learn more here and follow us. The Storm Prediction Center is one of the NOAA weather partners. They are located in the National Weather Center in Norman, Oklahoma. Greg Carbon gives us a glimpse into what the SPC does.
Our mission is to analyze and forecast severe thunderstorms and the potential for tornadoes, large hail, and damaging winds from those thunderstorms across the lower 48 states, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. One of the primary missions of the Storm Prediction Center is the issuance of severe thunderstorm and tornado watches across the country when conditions appear to be coming together to support the development of severe thunderstorms and tornadoes.
The world-class meteorologists in the Storm Prediction Center specialize in severe weather and keeping you safe. Learn more here and follow us.
The National Severe Storms Lab is working on increasing the lead time for severe weather warnings. The national average for tornado warnings is currently 13 minutes, but more notice would be helpful, especially for those in charge of moving large groups to shelter. Warn on Forecast will help forecasters issue hazardous weather warnings earlier. The project will give them more info about the chances of strong winds, large hail, and even tornadoes.
Currently, warnings are created by forecasters looking at the atmosphere outside, understanding its volatility, and then comparing that to how they see the Doppler radar presenting what's going on inside thunderstorms. Warn on Forecast is an idea where we're going to take the massive amounts of satellite, radar, and surface data and stick them all into a very high resolution prediction model. And then by producing new forecasts every 15 or 20 minutes, the forecasters hopefully will be able to use that model to produce warnings that extend out to an hour.
Before the National Weather Service can use this tool, it must be developed and tested. One big challenge will be deciding how to get the model predictions to the forecasters.
I'm going to keep this one very low. I'm just adjusting the track.
These hazardous weather prediction models are going to produce a huge amount of output. And this fire hose of data is just too much for forecasters to handle in real time quickly. So in order to help deal with that, NSSL has developed a related project called Facets. And Facets is the methodology which will enable forecasters to focus very quickly on the most important threats.
Once Warn on Forecast and Facets are proven to be reliable and effective, then forecasters will be better able to inform you of threats nearby. Learn more here and follow us.
The Hazardous Weather Test Bed is located at the National Weather Center in Norman, Oklahoma. It is used for experiments that will allow forecasters to learn and apply new technologies.
The Hazardous Weather Test Bed is a really unique space throughout all of NOAA. And this is where the researchers and the operational folks come together in a common space to solve operational problems and to test new research tools that the research community is working on. The goal is to accelerate the transfer from research to operations of the newest tools and techniques.
People come from around the world to collaborate on this unique project.
We can bring together not only NOAA people, but also university people, faculty, researchers, private sector meteorologists, folks working in other countries in meteorology, forecasters can all come together and focus on what the problem of the day is with the forecasters.
Each spring, several experiments occur in the Hazardous Weather Test Bed. Learn more here and follow us.
What are you looking at? And what are you ignoring? Did you notice the NOAA logo in the corner? Forecasters have a lot of information in front of them too. Every second counts during severe weather, and decisions about where to focus are constantly being made. This could be even more challenging in the future. Phased array radar will produce 4 to 6 times more information than what we have now, which brings us to the question researchers are hoping to answer. Will more radar information affect forecasters' decisions?
From our past experiments, we've learned a lot about how forecasters think during the warning decision process, but we've also learned that those thought processes are very complex, and for that reason, we need a better way to be able to track forecasters' cognitive activity.
Inbounds and possibly golf ball sized hail.
An eye tracker is a piece of technology that is used to determine in real time where someone's eye gaze is located. And these eye trackers are typically video-based, which means a camera sits below a computer monitor, and with infrared light and vector analysis, we can determine where a person is looking and how their eyes are moving.
Eye tracking is already being used in the medical field and air traffic control. Using similar research methods, NSSL is discovering the benefit for weather forecasting too. Phased array radar will give forecasters a lot more to think about. Understanding their decision-making process will help researchers develop even more user-friendly tools. So what's the benefit for you? Even better weather warnings. To learn more, check us out online and follow us on Facebook and Twitter.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back. Looking at the coastal water forecast here for the south coast of the Panhandle. Southwest winds 15 knots, seas 9 feet, and southerlies 15 to 20 knots on the north coast with 10-foot seas. And again, Lynn Canal, a little breezy in the afternoon with those gale force gusts out of the south. Otherwise, sustained winds at 20 knots, 4-foot seas. Southeast 15 for Stevens Passage, and south 15 for Clarence Strait. For Wednesday, Clarence Strait, south winds 15 knots, same thing for Stevens Passage with seas running 3 feet. Lynn Canal, southerlies at 20 knots, seas 4 feet. Pretty light winds out along the coast, southerlies at 10 with 9-foot seas on the south coast. North coast southeast winds 10 to 15 knots with seas also at around 9 feet. Prince William Sound, small craft advisories again tomorrow for east winds at 25 knots and 4-foot seas. Easterlies 30 knots for the North Gulf Coast, and north to northeast 20 knots for Cook Inlet, seas running 6 to 7 feet. Northeast at 20 for Kamishak Bay with 6-foot seas. And the Barren Islands, small craft advisories, north winds 25 knots, seas 12 feet. Outlook for Wednesday, Prince William Sound, easterlies at 10 knots with 2-foot seas. And east-northeast here for the North Gulf Coast, 15 knots, 7-foot seas. Easterlies for the Barren Islands and Kamishak Bay out of the east, with seas running 3 to 7 feet. Cook Inlet, light northerly winds south of the Forelands at 10 knots and east at 10 knots for northern Cook Inlet. Bristol Bay, northeast 15 knots, same forecast for the Alaska Peninsula. Northeast winds 15 knots, seas on the Pacific side as high as 10 feet. Kodiak Island on the east side, southerlies at about 15, seas 11 feet, but Shelikof Strait, small craft advisories, northeast 25 and seas at 8 feet. Outlook for Wednesday, Alaska Peninsula, west-northwest breeze 15 knots with 4 to 6-foot seas, southwest 10 in Bristol Bay, northeast 15 to 20 for Kodiak Island. Fox Islands tomorrow, north to northwesterlies at 15 knots, light winds for the central Aleutians, northwest at 10 to 15 with 6-foot seas, and northwest winds 15 knots for the western Aleutians. Light wind conditions continue through Wednesday for all the Aleutian chain. Kiska to Shemya southerlies at 15 knots, but from Amchitka eastward to Atka, west winds at 10 knots, really laid down there with 4-foot seas. Variable 10 to 15 for Unmak Island, and Alaska Island west at 15 knots with 4 to 6-foot seas. And for the southwest coast, along the Kuskokwim Delta coast, winds will be out of the northeast at 15 knots, northwest 15 for the Yukon Delta coast, Pribilof's north 15, St. Matthew Island west at 15 knots, and St. Lawrence Island northwest 15 knots with 3-foot seas, while Norton Sound will be variable to northeast, but only 10 knots with slight seas. And the outlook for Wednesday, Norton Sound, light easterly winds with slight seas continue, and north 20 for St. Lawrence Island, turn westerly at 20 knots for all of the southwest coast, including Nunivak Island, with seas running at about 4 feet. Southwest 20 with 4-foot seas, St. Matthew Island. Pribilof, southwest 15, seas 4 feet. Up to the north, brisk wind advisories continue through tomorrow for the eastern Beaufort Sea coast for easterly sustained at 25 knots. East winds at 20 knots on the central coast, and then east 25 on the west side there with 5-foot seas for small craft advisories. Cape Thompson to Cape Beaufort, west or east at 20, then northwest 20 knots from Cape Thompson to Wales. For Wednesday, Wales to Cape Thompson, west 15, northerlies 15 for the Point Hope, Cape Lisburne area. Otherwise, small craft advisories on the western Arctic coast, east wind sustained 25 knots, and brisk wind advisories for the central and east side for easterly winds at 25 knots. And for tonight, again, low clouds and fog will increase across the north slope once again and be probably heaviest on the eastern Arctic coast with continued breezy conditions. Diminishing thunderstorms where they do form tonight over the interior, but showers lingering through the night and into tomorrow morning. And rain periods for the southeast coast and north Gulf Coast to Kodiak Island on down the Alaska Peninsula. Tomorrow, that same pattern continues with rain along the southeast coast and panhandle due to that persistent front, and unsettled for the Alaska Peninsula, showery with some thunderstorms and a narrow band through the central interior there along the trough axis, but sunny to the north, continued breezy north slope and Arctic coast, about the same on Wednesday.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.